My background, essentially, I suppose I spent, well, I'm from Wales originally. So I've been living in Ireland for just over 20 years now. I arrived in 99. And as you've already mentioned, I was a bartender for many years. I spent 16 years working in the wonderful McDade's Public House just off Grafton Street. During my time there, I suppose my passion was always photography. That was always my hobby before it became my profession. And I used to sell landscape prints behind the bar. I used to hang them up behind the bar, and customers, particularly tourists, of course, would come in and would love to look at them. And I'd end up selling a few prints, And from that, a few of the locals that I got to know and befriend in the pub got married, and they'd say, "Oh, any chance you could do the wedding photography for us?" So that was a sort of a sideline, I suppose, for a few years until it got to, where was it, 2017, when I finally plucked up the courage to actually go full-time into photography. It actually took probably the love of a good woman, to actually give me the kick up the backside to make the leap, because I probably sort of lacked self-confidence or belief in myself at that stage to actually go into it full time. But I think maybe turning 50 in 2017, realizing that physically I wasn't able to do the job anymore behind the bar. It was tough. It was a tough gig working in the city centre, that eventually basically I decided it was the right time to actually start my own business, doing what I love to do. So that was it. And 4 years later, I'm still in business, which is a good sign. But obviously it's come with a lot of challenges along the way. But yeah, so that's essentially my background.
Explore some of these challenges you faced in setting up your business on behalf of the audience. Can you describe the single biggest challenge that you faced?
I kind of anticipated you probably asked me that question, John. I got to be honest and say that, there are a lot of sort of practical challenges that you face, the obvious ones, how, for me, obviously, in a service industry, it's how do you break into the marketplace, a marketplace that's flooded with competition already, These are the obvious kind of challenges. But I thought a little bit about the question you probably asked me. And I think my biggest challenge for me personally was my own inner demons, was struggling with the insecurity or the lack of confidence that I could actually do the job. I always knew I was a good photographer. I always knew I could take good pictures. That was the easy bit, It's all the other stuff that comes with running a business. It's all about the the how do you get your name out there? How do you promote yourself? How do you compete with all the other people that are doing the same thing that you're doing? And then it's all the add-ons, how do you build a website? How do you do accounts? How do you do all this? How do you do that? And all this was kind of a little bit kind of intimidating when I first started. I remember finishing up in the pub, and I gave myself 2 weeks off, and I sat down at the computer when I came back from my holidays, and I put up a post on Facebook saying, "Hey guys, I've left the pub and now I'm a full-time photographer." And I don't know what I expected, but it was almost as if I was waiting for the phone to start ringing, And I was 50, I wasn't 20, so I wasn't wet behind the ears. I kind of had the knowledge about life and how a very broad idea of how business worked, but I still went into it very naively, thinking, it was just going to happen organically. And it was obviously a bit of a wake-up call when that didn't happen, and I had to sort of then learn very quickly how to actually promote myself as an individual, So that was probably the hardest thing, because I think when you work behind the bar, being a good bartender is all about banter. It's all about engaging with the customers and your colleagues as well. And I think the nature of being a bartender is that there's plenty of banter that flies between you, and you're not used to people being kind of complimentary. Let's put it that way. There's plenty of slagging going on, in the bar. So when I start then running my own business, people are telling you, you've got to big yourself up. You've got to promote yourself. You've got to tell people how good you are. That doesn't come easy, to someone like myself, like who would have faced those challenges of of insecurity, etc. at the start. So it took a while for me to get into the habit of saying, actually, do you know what, guys, I'm actually quite a good photographer, and like, please try me, and see. But now you can't shut me up. Now, like, I'm constantly on everywhere, social media and everything else, because I recognize that, you have to push yourself. It's a very, very competitive business I'm in, and, you need to get your name out there, and by hook or by crook,
I think what you're describing here is a very valuable lesson that many people who start out in self-employment learn along the way. Never be afraid to stick your chest out and hold your chin straight and look people straight in the eye and tell them, I am worthy of your services.
Yeah, it's very true, John. Yeah, no, you do. And it does come in time. It's just those first probably 18 months, I'd say, where, you just, it's difficult to do that, because, like, I know for myself, the best thing that actually happened to me when I was setting up was I did a job for my niece is a racing driver, and she has a promoter, and he invited me down to take a couple of profile shots for her. And I got chatting to him, and he invited me along to the summer expo for the County Kildare Business Chamber. And I went along. I didn't really know what to expect, to be perfectly honest with you, but I had a load of business cards with me. And the first person I met when I walked in the door, who was actually organizing the event that day, I'd actually shot her wedding about 10 years previously, purely by coincidence. So, of course, we had a great old chat. And the first thing she said to me was, do you have your camera with you? Which I did, in the back of the car. So she said, could you take a few pictures for us? So on the back of that, I ended up joining the Kildare Chamber. And that was absolutely the best thing I could have done, because you're in a room of people, like-minded individuals, who are all in business, who are all probably sole traders or SMEs, and who are all facing the same challenges that you are. And obviously, when you start having your one-to-ones and you get to talk to these people, you realize actually that we're all in the same boat. We're all in this together. And as you start to realize that, the confidence then starts to improve, because you realize you're not on this on your own. And people are on the end of the phone. You can just pick up the phone and just call them and, discuss whatever problems you might have. And they're only too willing to give you some help and advice,
Yeah, it's a very interesting comment you made there, Andy, that we're all in the same boat. I had a discussion there recently with a colleague of mine from the Professional Speaking Association, Steve Judge, and he was talking about the COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on people in general in the business world. We're all in the same storm, he said, but we're all in different boats, because different people have different problems, or the scale of the problems is bigger for some people than for other people. And he's self-employed. He felt he was in a canoe sailing towards, or rowing, towards the sun. What's been the single biggest lesson that you've learned since starting Celtic photography?
Wow. What's been the biggest lesson I've learned? Look, I suppose for the fear of repeating myself, it's believing in yourself. Because you cannot expect anybody else to believe in you if you don't believe in yourself. So I think one of the many challenges I faced when I first started out was getting my pricing right. And I struggled with that for a long time, because, you're so desperate to get the work in that, you price yourself very much at the lower end of the market, because you think it's all about let's just get the work in. Let's just get a few bob coming in the door, rather than looking at, what you do and the quality of the work that you provide, and actually pricing yourself accordingly. And one of the many one-to-ones I probably had at the beginning, I chat about this to people, and they'd all say the same thing. They'd come back with the same message. You have to learn to value yourself. I remember, like, I think one of the first jobs I did was, I don't know, I can't remember. It was a headshot or something like that. And maybe I charged, I don't know, €60, let's just say, for argument's sake, And I thought to myself, geez, that's not bad now, €60. If I could get 10 jobs like that a week, that would be the same as I was earning in the pub, happy days. That's not a lot. And then you sort of, as time goes on and you realize you have to pay out for so much stuff. You have to pay for your equipment. You have to pay for travel. You have to pay for insurance. You have to pay for web design and so on and so forth. And suddenly then when you start looking at the outgoings compared to the incoming, you realize actually €60 doesn't cut it, And obviously over time, as time goes on, you become far more aware of what your costs are. But you also have to sit down and you have to calculate, how long are you actually going to spend on the site taking the photographs, but how long are you going to spend then editing the photographs? And, as time goes on, you start to build up an hourly rate and you start to then realize this is how much I need to charge in order to be able to earn a living out of this. And it becomes easier. But in the short term, it's very hard to learn to value yourself properly, and I think that was, if I could single one thing out, it would be that. I would say, learn to value yourself properly.
That's a great answer, Andy. And I think what you're saying there is there's a grave danger in when you start out in the business, you want to get clients, and there's a grave danger in saying to yourself, I better start discounting. And the issue there is, once you start discounting your prices, it's very, very hard to increase them again, because word gets around that you're doing work for X and now you're charging Y. And people are saying to themselves, why is this person increasing their prices? What value is he or she delivering to me to justify that price increase? And then it becomes very hard to win customers. And I think it goes back to what we were saying there a few minutes ago. When you start out in self-employment, you have to be prepared to understand what your value is, what value you're giving to your customers for the service you're providing. And you have to be prepared to stick your chest out, be proud, and look people straight in the face. If you were to look back at the time that you started your business in Celtic photography, do you think you would have benefited from getting a coach at the time, even on an interim basis?
100%. Absolutely. I actually engaged with the business coach I was about 18 months into business, and it was something, like you go in and you have a degree of confidence yourself to start with, even though, as I said, you have those insecurities at the start, but you sort of, you're loath to ask for help because you just think, I'm more than capable of managing this on my own, and I can achieve what I want to achieve on my own. I don't need anybody else's help. And obviously, as time goes on, and when you're in a room full of a business network meeting and you're in a room full of people and 4 or 5 business coaches are in that room who are all making money, they're all successful business coaches, you think there must be plenty of people out there that are actually engaging with these guys. So, maybe I should think about it and maybe it could be useful for me. And I don't know if I'm allowed to mention, can I mention another business coach that I worked with? Can I mention their name?
Of course you can, yes.
Yeah, that's okay. No, I wasn't sure. So, yeah, I worked with Ted Welsh from Enabled Me Coaching, who was outstanding for me. Now, what I found was all the business coaches in the chamber were good. They were all good at what they do. They were all experts in their field. But I think, like a lot of industries, a lot of the time it comes down to personality and who'd be a good personal fit for me. And that was the decision I made in the end. And Ted, I found, was really on my kind of level personality wise. And I worked with Ted in 2 separate sessions, 3 months each. And it was invaluable, absolutely invaluable, the help he gave me. And I came up with an analogy after I finished working with Ted. I likened it to having a jigsaw puzzle. And, inside your head, you have all the pieces to create a successful business, but they're all jumbled up and you don't know how to put any kind of structure on them. And what Ted did for me, he kind of found all the straight edges and he created that structure, the outside, and I was able to get all the rest of the pieces and put them in their respective places. And he gave me that structure, and from that, I've gone from strength to strength. And actually, when we talk, coming back to what we were talking about pricing, that was one of the first things he taught me, was to learn how to value myself and to be able to price myself in the right way. But it was one of many things that Ted gave me. I mean, Ted's catchphrase is finding the answers within yourself. And that's exactly what he does. He sits there. He doesn't lead you. He doesn't tell you what you should or shouldn't be doing. He just encourages you to find the answers from within yourself, you know? So absolutely, in answer to your question, 100%.
Moving on from talking about business and Celtic photography, you're from South Wales, or West Wales, I should say. And I think, knowing you, Andy, that rugby is a big part of your life. How did you feel when the Wales versus France match ended there some weeks ago in the Six Nations? Wales were so near to winning the Triple Crown. What thoughts were going through your head at the time?
Well, we won the Triple Crown, John. It was the Grand Slam we missed out on. Look, I mean, there's a degree of arrogance amongst Welsh people that we have a God-given right to be at the top of the table all the time. And obviously, as anybody who watches sport knows, that's not always the case. And I don't know. I mean, we like Wales have been very, very successful, especially in recent years under Warren Gatland. Personally, my love for rugby has probably waned a little bit over the last 10 years because of the style of the game, because of the structure to the game. I just find it's become a bit too rigid. Like in my day, when I was a young fella growing up, you know, it was all about avoiding the tackle. It was all about, you know, that expansive style of rugby and, you know, the jinking runs and the swiveling hips and all that kind of stuff. And now it's all about, you know, taking on the tackle, taking three men out of the tackle. You know, it's all physical. It's all structured. It's all, I don't know, like I remember young fella, I think Matthew Morgan was it? I think his name was. And I remember him coming with Wales there to the World Cup. I forget which World Cup it was now, but he was left on the bench, you know, for the whole tournament. I think he came on against Fiji for a cameo 10 minutes. And he was very much like Shane Williams in his stature and his style of play as well. He was unpredictable. And, you know, he was hugely creative. But Warren Gatland wouldn't pick him because he wanted players that would play to his system and would be disciplined and play in his system. And that kind of, I just, you know, I don't enjoy the game for that reason as much as I used to when I was a young fella. But at the same time, listen, you know, we nearly won a Grand Slam with a team that was expected to really struggle this year. So, you know, I'm not going to knock it because I recognize that I'm living in a country that's only had 3 Grand Slams in their history. So, you know, it can't be too arrogant about it, you know?
Yeah, true enough. What has the day been like for you during lockdown? You know, the days are long, they're dark. Have you managed to keep your spirits up?
Actually, you know what, John, I've been fortunate. Like what I think a lot of people, because the working from home thing is new to so many people, that's been a huge challenge for many. I probably had the advantage of having been in that position since 2017 when I set up in business. Like I went from being in one of the most sociable jobs you could do, working behind a bar where you're dealing with people 24/7. And suddenly, you know, I start my own business and okay, I'm out on site taking photographs, but in the main, I'm probably sat in front of a computer screen on my own in my office here. And I'm editing for 8 hours a day. So I was kind of used to the whole working on my own thing. So that side of it didn't bother me that much. The biggest, obviously, I mean, the hardest thing was the fact that the work wasn't coming in. Certainly the first part of this year when we were into our second lockdown. Last year actually was a very good year for me. It was, in fact, it's the busiest I've ever been, even though, you know, we were locked down for 5 months of the year. Because a lot of people were taking advantage of the trading online voucher and the business continuity voucher, all the vouchers that were available, the grants available from the local enterprise office and so on. So I think a lot of businesses took the opportunity to look at their own kind of systems and everything else that were in play and said, okay, now's the time while we're quiet that we can explore this and we can start improving our websites and start organizing content for our website. So on the back of that, actually, I was very busy last year. So, in reality, COVID last year didn't really impact me that much. This year has been a little bit different. I think, people have stopped applying for those grants now. So business was quiet for the first 3 months. But it's just started now since Easter, and since the lockdown has eased slightly, the restrictions have been lifted slightly, that you can start seeing the emails coming in again and the phone calls are coming in. And hopefully now, we're in for a prosperous, few months ahead. In
terms of your photography business, how would you differentiate yourself from your competitors? What makes Andy Davies or Andy Davis?
What's my USP? Huh? Yeah, it's something. Yeah, I often ask myself that same question, because I think photographers, actually, it's not just probably limited to photography. It's probably in any kind of service profession. The difference between the relative people in that profession is probably negligible. We're all good at what we do. Okay, photography. I hate using the term artists, but apparently we are. We're because we're creatives, we're artists. So we probably approach a subject completely differently. So you might have 4 different photographers, and we'll all approach it in a slightly different way. We'll all produce great results at the end of it, but it comes down to what the client, I suppose, is looking for, and how you interpret that. But when I first set up, I remember one of my best friends, his sister, he was telling his sister that I was setting up in business, and she kept saying to him, get Andy in front of people. Just get Andy to meet people. Get Andy to introduce himself to people, because Andy's biggest selling point is himself. It's his personality. Maybe it goes back to what I was saying to you at the beginning, John, where when you've spent so long working behind the bar and you're so used to being slagged if you say anything, about yourself, so it's uncomfortable to say something like that, to actually big yourself up. But, she kept saying that to my friend, and I suppose now I'm kind of more used to doing it. And now I recognize that you have to do it. You have to stand out from the crowd. So I have no problem now shouting from the rooftops, hey, listen, you know what? I'm actually good at what I do. But I think your personality goes such a long way when you're dealing with clients. Say, for example, you're doing a headshot, and you're doing a headshot for somebody that maybe you've never met before. They've contacted you organically through the website, and they want, so you rock up onto the site, and you've allowed for an hour maybe to do this headshot, and you're meeting a complete stranger. So you have to learn very quickly how to engage with that person and put them at ease. It's hugely important that they're relaxed in front of the camera. So that doesn't come immediately. If you don't have a good personality to start with, if you don't have an engaging personality to start with, you're already, facing an uphill task, like to try and get that person to relax. So I think because maybe it's my background in the bar work that I'm used to chatting to people, and you're probably realizing that already, that I'm going on and on. But I think that really helps when you put yourself in that situation. You have to try and just chat to somebody. So quite often, I won't even talk about photography at all. I'll just talk about whatever it might be, whatever the issue of the day is, maybe the weather or something. I did a shoot, actually, I remember maybe 3 years ago, for a family. They were having a reunion, and they wanted to recreate a photograph that they'd taken 20 years previously, where all the family was sitting on the couch, So I walked into this house, and it was a small enough house, and there were like 10 or 12 people in the house at the time. And you're walking in, complete strangers, and they're uncomfortable with you, with your camera and everything else. And the only thing that got me through that was the fact I spotted a Leinster flag hanging, and they had the Leinster match on the TV. They were playing Heineken Cup or something that afternoon. So I immediately just started talking about rugby, and that straight away, that kind of got them chatting and got them more comfortable talking to me, and told them obviously my background, like I've just mentioned to you. So long-winded answer, I suppose, John. Yeah, it's for me personally, I think it's my personality that probably sets me apart. I hope, anyway. Maybe people watch this and they'll come back and tell me different.
You've now got an established business. Where do you see Andy Davies taking Celtic photography over the next 5 years?
Yeah, it's a good question. When I set up, I suppose I kind of had this big plan that within maybe 3 or 4 years, I'd have my own studio, gallery, selling my landscape prints and everything else. In reality, that is the plan, still the plan, but it just doesn't happen as fast as you want it to happen. You have to work hard at it, John, and whilst I'm getting there, I've seen my business grow. I don't want to say exponentially by any stretch, but it's gone up progressively as the years have gone past. I just wish it happened just a little bit faster. But I still have my long-term plan is to eventually have my own studio. Where, I don't know yet, but because at the moment I shoot in the house here. I have a sort of a temporary setup in the house. So for product photography and all that kind of stuff, I can set up my backgrounds, my lighting and all that. But obviously then you have to take it all down again when you're when you're actually living in the house. So in an ideal scenario, I'd like to have my own purpose-built studio, converted space, where I can have a nice editing suite and all the sort of the bells and whistles that go with it, So, but that's sort of, in a physical sense, I suppose. From a business sense, I kind of want to become, I'd love people to, I'm going to go off slightly off tangent here, but I remember I was looking at rebranding a couple of years ago. I came up with the name Celtic Photography way back in 2005 when I was selling those landscape prints in the bar, And at the time we were still in the Celtic Tiger. Because a lot of American tourists were in the pub and were buying the pictures and were loving all those kind of, shots of Ireland and everything else, because of the connection between Wales and Ireland. So Celtic was a natural kind of name that I came up with. But when I was looking at rebranding a couple of years ago, I thought to myself, I don't know if I really like the name Celtic Photography, Now, an awful lot of photographers use their own name, so you'll see like Annie Leibovitz, for example, photography. But Annie Leibovitz is a household name. Everybody's heard of her, No one's heard of Andy Davis photography. So a lot of people I spoke to, and I did get advice, I asked people's opinions about it, and they all said, look, you've worked hard to build up the name Celtic Photography. You should stick with it. It's a good name. It's something different. And I've never really been comfortable with Andy Davis photography. I think it's a little bit lazy, to use your own name. But I'm trying to think what my train of thought was there. But I suppose where I'd like to see myself in a few years is that people are looking for me. They're looking for Andy Davis photography, not the actual name, but they're looking for me as a person to come and shoot their photographs. I've become well known enough to have built up my own name, if you know what I mean, in the industry. Right now, I'm still, even though I'm 4 years in business and I might be relatively well known in Kildare circles or South Dublin, that's as far as it goes kind of thing, I'd love to get to a point where people are contacting me looking for Andy Davis to do their photo shoot because they've heard great things about me. So I suppose, how soon that happens, I don't know. I could say, I'd love that to be the case in 2 years' time, but realistically, no, it's probably not. It could take 7 or 8 years for that to happen, So you just have to sort of keep plugging away and keep continuously giving a good service to your clients. And hopefully word will get around eventually. And in time, people will say, that's the guy we want,
Aside from rugby union, what other pastimes do you have in your life?
Now, well, I mean, I love all sport, to be honest, John. I'm a big hurling fan, actually, which surprises a lot of people. I when I first arrived in Ireland, one of the guys I lived with was a Tipperary man, you know, and I don't think you can live with a Tipperary fella and not be drawn into the hurling world. To be honest with you, like, hand on heart, I would actually say now I'm more of a hurling man than anything else, because I love the purity of the game. I love everything that revolves around the game. You know, it's not just the sport itself, but it's the whole community. It's the whole social aspect of the sport, you know, and of course, when you look at the sport itself, it's just phenomenal. It's just an incredible game to watch and to play, I would imagine. Not that I ever had that good fortune, but I love the sport, and I love the fact that it's amateur. You know, I think that's what makes it. And the fact that the lads, if they kiss their jerseys, it means something, you know, compared to a soccer player who could be gone in a few months' time and playing for somebody else. So sport for me is a big thing. It plays a big part, you know. My wife's the gardener, so she looks after the outdoors and I look after the indoors, sitting in front of the TV all the time. But no, look, I mean, photography is my passion as well as my career, you know. So I still enjoy. I think it's important because it was my hobby when I started, and I want it to still be my hobby when I finish, because, you know, I don't want to end up resenting it, if you know what I mean. I want to still enjoy photography when I eventually hang up the camera or hang up my boots, whatever the expression is. But I still love going out with a camera in my own time and my own space, and going off up the mountains, taking a sunrise, or to the coast, or whatever it might be. That still takes up an awful lot of my private time, if you like, as well as my professional time.
Yeah. So what you're saying there is the work you're doing, it's work you love to do. And that's really important when you're self-employed. How can people make contact with Andy Davies? And what offer do you have for the audience today?
You can contact me in several ways. You can get me through the website, which is celticphotography.ie, or you can contact me by email, andy@celticphotography.ie. Do you want my phone number as well, John?
LinkedIn, Facebook.
Yeah, I'm on all the nature of the job that I do. It lends itself perfectly to all the social media platforms. Being able to put photographs up every day is a privilege almost. Like, you know, I'm very lucky that I have that kind of job to be able to do that. So yeah, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn. I even have a Pinterest page as well, although I don't interact with that as much. So that, yeah, people can contact me through any of those platforms. For your listeners today, I decided, I mentioned earlier on about pricing, so it is important that you value yourself, and discounts, whilst they are a nice little sort of introductory offer, they're not to be sort of taken for granted. But yeah, I'd like to offer a 10% discount to anybody who's listening to your program today, John. So be delighted to offer them that.